Hey there guys, and welcome back to Tech Easily. So in today's video, I will be making a part 2 to my HTML linking MySQL database using PHP. Now this is a continuation from my first video, and if you guys haven't watched that, I'll leave it in the description box down below, and it should be coming up in the I button as well, so please check that one out first. But for now, in today's video, I will be teaching you guys how to create a form in HTML. So I will be going through all the elements and attributes and all the input types, and also how to use the HTTP post and get methods with the forms. Then I will also teach you how to style your forms using CSS. That will be really basic, but I'll show you some techniques to do that. And then in my future videos, I will be using this form, and I will be storing and retrieving information from my SQL database through this form. So this video is really important. So if you want to see how to do that, then please keep on watching. Okay guys, so let's start off with the basic notepad like always. And right now I'm going to create a folder on my desktop, and I'm going to call this form, and this is where I'll be saving my CSS file and also this HTML file I'm creating. Okay, so let's get right into coding without wasting any time. So like always, my form is going to go inside my body here. In HTML, we actually specify a form by using a form element. So let's go ahead and open this and close it as well. So the inputs that are going to go inside your form, they can actually be various types. So some of them, or examples of some of them, include radio buttons, submit buttons, check boxes, input fields, etc. Okay, so before we continue, I'll just zoom this in so you guys can see better. Now, one important thing to note is that the input element is the most important one. So let's put this in to our form here and also see what types there actually are that we can put into our input fields. So I'm just going to move this across so you guys can see better and open up my input tag. Now let's just say that we're creating this form to register into a website. What would be a typical input field? So let's start off with the basics like the name. And to define a single line input, we have to use the type is equal to, open up your quotation marks and close them off. And in between these, I'm going to put text. And guys, this is basically the most important part. This is what differentiates what your user has to put into that box. So for example, if this was for password, my type would actually be password here. If this was for age, my type would actually be number here. I'm going to go through all that stuff, but just so you keep this in mind. Okay, so after this, we're going to put in our ID, and I'm going to say the ID is name, and then we're also going to put in a name. And what we put inside the name is something that will help us to understand what that input box is for. So later on, this will come in really handy. So you want the name to be indicative of what your input field is about. So I'm going to call this name, because that's what our first input field is. You want the user to put in their names. Now I'm going to close this off, and I'm going to save my file. So click File, Save As. I'm going to go into my desktop where I have a folder that I created called Form. And I'm going to save this file and call it form.html. Again, save it as any name you want. Just have your .html extension attached. And now let's test this out in our browsers. So I'll just open up my folder, double click. So here you guys can see that my input box has appeared, and this is where the user is going to be typing in their name. But you guys probably noticed, how is the user supposed to know what to put inside this box? I haven't told them what information needs to go inside here. For all they know, they can put in their email address, they can put in their password, their age. So this is what I'm going to be showing you guys next. Okay, so back into our code now. Okay, so we use an element that's known as a label to define to the user what should go into this specific box. So on top of my input here is where I'm going to put my label in, because the user needs to know what they're actually putting in the box before they put it into the box. So let's open and close up our label tag. So inside our label here, we use an attribute that's called for. So let's put that in, and equals quotation mark. And what goes inside here has to be the same as the ID attribute inside of your input. So it's able to bind these two together. So I'm going to put name in here because that's what I have down here. Now in between your opening and your closing label is where you're going to be telling your user what your input has to be about. So in our case it's the name, so I'm going to put in name here. That's just like that. Okay, so let's check this out now. File, save, or Control+S, and open this up. Okay, so perfect. You guys can see that our label, so let's open this up with the code. Our label for name has appeared, so this one here, before our box, and then we have our input box where the user can now type in their names. Now there's another cool way of telling the user what to put into your input box, and that's what I'm going to be showing you guys next. Okay, so what you guys can use is a thing that's known as a placeholder, which is basically background text, and that goes inside of our input. Basically, it's just going to give an example to the user of what they need to put inside that box. So I'm actually going to make this bigger first because we're going to need the space, and then actually put that in. So inside here, I need to indicate to the user what they need to do for this input box. So I'm going to say write your name here. Now again, we can change this placeholder as we go on, and I'll show you that to, for example, write your email, etc. And the cool thing is that once I start to type in my input box, this background text actually disappears. So let me show you guys that now. Let's see. Okay, so you guys can see that my text from my placeholder has been put in here. So if I start to type into this box, the background text disappears, and that's really, really cool. Now the next thing we want to do is let the user put in their age. So basically we follow the same procedure, but this time the input has to be numeric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste these two lines down here, and I'm just separating them out so you guys can see better. And this time we want to let the user put in their age, so I'm going to change name to age here. Again, the for has to be same as the ID so it can bind them together. So I'm going to change this to age. I'm going to change my name to age as well. And I'm going to say write your age here. Or put in your age sounds better. Okay, so for the most important part, this is basically the same as the one we have up there, because we haven't changed the type yet. And like I told you guys, this is what differentiates whether it's age or like a number or is it text. So the type here is going to be number. Before I show this to you guys in the browser, there's probably one thing you guys noticed, and that is my input does not have a closing tag, as you guys can see, like I have for a label, like I have for a form, the body, HTML. So all of my other tags have closing tags except my input. So now in HTML, most elements do have an ending tag. However, there are some exceptions, and input is one of these exceptions. And these exceptions are known as empty or being void. So basically, we don't do this for our input tag. It's one of the empty ones, so we just have an opening one and not a closing one. So let's save this and see if the age has appeared. So I'm just going to refresh. And as you guys can see, that my second one that's known as age has appeared, and this time if you see that this input box, it actually has a place where you can put the numbers go up or down. And this is different to our first box because the main difference, like I told you guys, is from the type. The type is text for our first one, so there's no way you can go up or down with numbers. But for the second, since our type is number, it allows you can actually type in a number yourself as well, or you can use this to go up and down as well. There's actually a lot more attributes you can put into your input boxes, like the max length, the min length. For example, for age, like I had a really high number there, you could actually put the maximum or the minimum where user can't enter more or less from there. You can make a field required, so the form can't be submitted unless that field is filled in. There's lots and lots of more things you guys can do, but for now we're keeping it basic. And for the last two, I'm going to do email and password because, again, these are most commonly used. So I'm going to say email. I'm going to put that in as my ID. Change it for my for. Again, email is going to be text. There's actually an input type that's email as well, but it gets a little complicated, especially to start off with. So I'm going to say the name is email and then write your email here. Okay, so we don't need to test this out because it's basically the same as the name one. There's no really difference here. And the last one is password. So this time I'm going to say password, and then I'm going to just change the ID here. Actually, for just to make this short, I'm just going to say PWD, shortcut for password. Then write your password here. Now, one really important thing, the type for password is actually password, and if you leave this as text, when you go to run this in your browser, the user can actually see the password they're putting in. It doesn't go with the little dots. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So let's save this and refresh. So as you can see, all of my inputs and the labels are here. So this is what I meant for password. Whatever I'm putting in, it hides it. So that's why we use the input type as password for this password one. So now that we have all of our fields in place, let's go into how we actually use the submit button to store this or pass this information. So let's go right ahead and create our submit button. And how that works is the same as before. So we need an input, but this time the type is going to be equal to submit. And this is what is going to submit our form data that we fill in to something known as a form handler, which is put inside the form's action attribute. We haven't put that in yet, but we are going to in a little. Okay, so let's just do this first. So form action is equal to the name of our PHP file, and basically it just defines that what action will take place. When you click on the submit button, all of this data or information will be passed to this file. So I'll just say send data.php. Let's just say that's the name of the PHP file that we're sending all of this data to. Another really important attribute that goes into our form is the HTTP method that we can use. Now there's two types. So we can use method is equal to get, or we can use method is equal to post. Now I'll be going through both of them and showing you what the difference is, because I believe when I show it to you, you guys will understand it better than just me talking here. So let's use get first. And the biggest thing you guys need to understand about get method is when we enter in all our data, so the name, the age, the email, the password, when I submit this form and it's sending it to this PHP file, what you're going to get in your URL, because you're using the get method, is you can see all of this information, even your password, being passed through the URL. So let's test this out and actually show you show you guys what I mean. So let's open this up. Okay, so let's put in the information and complete our form here. Let's just say the name is Emma Smith, age is 22, email is emma@gmail.com, and then the password I'm going to put in as pass. So once I click this submit button here, like I told you guys, all of this information, so Emma 22, this email, this password, will actually be shown in my URL. So let's go ahead and do that. Click on submit. So as you guys can see, the name I put in was Emma Smith, so you can see that. The age I put in was 22, email, and then the password is pass as well. So this is what I meant by, if you use the get method, all of your information, including sensitive information like the password, will be passed through the URL, and you can see that. So this is why get method isn't such a good idea, because you don't want your sensitive information being displayed. Now let me go back and show you guys the post method. You guys can see. Okay, so if we use the HTTP method called post, the major difference that you're going to see is that post is obviously more secure, and this is because it doesn't pass your parameters in your URL. So this is probably the one that I would mostly use, and I'd recommend everyone to use this, mostly because of security purposes. So let's see this in action and actually show you guys. So save this form and just reload your page so the changes show here too. Okay, so I'm just going to put in Emma Smith, age is 22. I actually don't need to fill all these in because they're not required and so on. So if I submit this, you will see that these parameters and my information that I just put in will not be shown in my URL. So there we go. This is the main difference between post and get methods, and get is better to use. Okay guys, so now that we've gone through the whole form and the action and the methods for HTTP, let's get into my favorite part, which is CSS. So I'm going to be styling this form using CSS. Now I'm not going to go crazy and do something extremely complicated. We're just starting off small, so I'm just going to show you some basic tips and tricks to style your form. And again, I'm going to be using external CSS referencing. If you're confused about what this is, I do have a video on this. I'll put it in the I button right now and also in the description box down below, where I go through all the methods of CSS referencing. So please check them out before watching this part. So again, it goes inside our head. The link we're going to use, rel is equal to style sheet, type is equal to text slash CSS, and then my href is going to be equal to a file that I'm going to call style.css, and just save that. Again, I've gone through what all of these mean, so just check that video out to recap. So I have another file here which I'm going to be using. I'm going to call this style.css, so let's save this in the same folder so as my HTML file. And like I said, I will call this file style.css and save. So to style our form, that is what our selector in our CSS page, CSS file is going to be called. So form is my selector. Open your squiggly bracket and close it off. And right now, as you guys can see, it's going across and it doesn't look that pretty. So let's change that. So let's change the width here to be, let's just say test it out to see how that looks. So 100 pixels. I'm actually just going to zoom this in so it's easier for you guys. And save this, and then let's just reload our browser to see if it made any change. And as you guys can see, it made a world of a difference. So we changed the width and you can see that looks so much better. It looks like a form would look like in your actual websites. So let's go ahead and make more changes. So if we see, you can't really see your label as much as I'd like to, so I want to change the color and also make this stand out. So change the text to be in bold. So the property we use to do that is known as font weight, and then your colon, and then put bold as your value, and then semicolon to close that off. And again, let's see how that works. So now you can see that our text has come in bold and that looks a lot better again. And then I'm just going to change the color of my text. Let's just say blue. Again, refresh. So that looks so much better now. A thing I want to do is in my HTML file, before my form, I'm just going to put in a H1 tag, or H2, and then just say this is a sign up form. I'm just going to put that in. And let's go back to our CSS now. So just so we know what type of form it is or how to specify that, you can again change the color, the font type, the size. I've gone through all of this in my CSS videos, so that's easy to do. One thing I want to do, you guys, is the border here for your inputs. So I want to change how thick this border is, and I also want to change the color. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so since it's the input that we want to change, so that's what our selector is going to be in our CSS file. So I'm going to put in input, and then I'm going to open and close my squiggly brackets. Inside here, I'm going to say border as my property, and then 2 pixels. Solid, because we want the line to be solid, 2 pixels, because I want it to be that thick. And then the color, you can specify this to be any color in the world. I'm going to say gray here. And then save this and test this out. So as you guys can see, if I zoom in, you can see the border appearing, you can see the color, it looks better, but this looks too joined together. So actually I can change that in my code in my HTML file. You can do it in CSS as well, but I want to show you a way to do that in your HTML file. So what you do is you can use a thing called BR. Basically, this is a line break in text. So the way that our submit button is too close to everything else, I do want a little space here. So that's why I used BR. So save my file and then see this again. Okay, so yeah, that looks so much better now. So you guys can do that if you want a little space between your things. We could do that between all of these as well, but for now I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Let's also change the color of the input. So I want, if the user, so just say Emma here, or the age or the color, and also the color on my submit button, I want to change that color, and also for my H2. So I want to show you guys how to do that. Another cool thing you can do with CSS is if I also want to change the color of my H2, so this text color instead of black, I want it to be orange, and I also want the same border as I did for my input. A cool thing you can do is you can put a comma after your first selector. You can put a comma and then say that I also want to apply all the styles that are going to go in here to this, as well as to my H2 as well as my input. So I'll show you guys. That's actually a really cool thing to note as well, because it saves you time, saves repeating your code, which is always a really good thing. So I'm saying color orange should be applied to input and also H2. So let's see that in action. So as you guys can see, just by using a little comma, I have saved repeating this code, copying and pasting it twice. I also got the border that I wanted and the color. So if I put in Emma now, you can see that my text is actually appearing in orange. And that's what I wanted. There's actually a lot more you can do. You can zoom into your inputs when it's clicked. There's actually, I think I can make a separate video on that. But for the purpose of this series, I think covering all of this should be good. Okay, so that's it for today's video, you guys. I hope you guys learned something about creating forms in HTML and differentiating between the input types, labeling those forms, how to use the submit button, how to use HTTP post and get methods and the difference between those, and then some really basic styling with CSS. Now this was an important video, you guys, because we are going to be continuing from here and using this form in my future videos, where we're going to get into PHP and MySQL, and that's really the interesting stuff. So please stay and keep an eye out for those. So until we code again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and leave any recommendations or questions you guys may have in the comment section down below, and I will try and get to them as quick as I can, and I will see you in my next video.